when you are truly powerful, that's when humility actually sets in at the deepest level. Humility is the context from which we gain integrity. And integrity is the context from which you gain courage. And so the most courageous person is actually the most humble person, because he doesn't make decisions based on what protects themselves, but what protects others.
Welcome to the MTNTOUGH podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the MTNTOUGH podcast. I am Dustin Diefenderfer, host and CEO, and I'm so glad that you are here. We love seeing you dive back into these episodes week after week, and it is our goal every single episode to bring you an inspiring guest that is focused on that mindset, that mental fitness, so that you can level up that mental toughness toolbox so that you can live the abundant life and that always ready lifestyle. If you are a new listener or a loyal listener, two things. One is, as a podcast listener, you guys do get 6 weeks free on the MTNTOUGH app. So all you need to do is use the code MTNPOD, that's Mountain Pod, and that's going to get you 6 weeks of free training on MTNTOUGH Plus. That's going to cover all our physical, mental, spiritual, nutritional training. So that's a great way to make sure you're rocking and rolling here in 2025. Go ahead and do that if you are interested at mountaintough.com. Click Start Free Trial and then enter that code MTNPOD. That's going to get you going for those 6 weeks. Secondly, if you are a new or loyal listener, the rankings and reviews do mean the world to the MTNTOUGH team. I love seeing your feedback come through, and also a ranking or review on the podcast store of your choice allows these episodes to get out to a lot more people to transform more lives. Shifting over now to today's guest, this conversation was one of my favorite mental toughness conversations I have ever had. On the show today, we have Erwin McManus. He is lead pastor of Mosaic Church. He's also a filmmaker, an author, and he unpacked the mental toughness, mental fitness concept in a way on this episode that I have never heard before and never heard articulated quite as well. Amazing, amazing man, amazing conversation. So stand by for my conversation with Erwin McManus. I'm glad you are able to jump on the show. I've been, interested in chatting with you for years. I've, listened to a lot of your content on the podcast store, and I'm always listening and searching and striving to find different spiritual leaders and spiritual mentors out there. And I've really enjoyed your content over the years on your biblical teachings and your spiritual teachings. And it's been great for me. It's been super helpful.
Hey, thanks so much, man. I'm so excited about just being with you and having this conversation together.
Thanks. And I'm guessing we're probably the first ever hunting podcast you've been on, and probably the first podcast that gives firearms to each of our guests.
I think you might be my first. I don't remember a previous firearm centered podcast, but I do love your sign, Stay Dangerous. And I don't know if you know this, but about 20 years ago, I wrote a book called The Barbarian Way.
Okay.
Its longer title was The Barbarian Way Out of Civilization. And a huge part of that is because when I became a person of faith, I felt like men were brutally domesticated, and that faith was actually making us softer rather than making us stronger, more courageous, more bold. So I wrote this book about how to reclaim our barbaric self and to live a life that is dangerous. And so really the core of the book is to stay dangerous.
Man, that is really, really interesting, because we were also just talking about this exact topic yesterday. I love that you brought that up so much, because I had a conversation yesterday, and I often wonder if a lot of the symptoms we're facing as men specifically is because in many, many ways we are or can be found in kind of this lion in a cage analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can feel like we're a lion in a cage when we are at a computer all day, and then we're in front of screens all evening, and then we're in traffic with more screens and more lights. And our nature, our genetic makeup, our wiring as men, it's hard to really feed that in today's society. Do you think that,
Yeah,
do you think that
I think
relates?
since you're a hunter, you know that the way you domesticate an animal is that you remove the danger and then you remove the need for hunting. And so if you feed an animal and you keep them safe, they domesticate. And I think that's ironically what's happened to us in a culture is that we have removed the danger. And so most people have grown up in a very safe environment and has removed the need to hunt or to work or to fight for food because feed me and keep me safe and I'll domesticate. And that's the mental structure that a lot of, I'm going to say, men have right now in our present culture.
Yeah.
Keep me safe, keep me fed, and I won't cause any problems.
And how do we battle against that, especially thinking that the next 10 years, the next 20 years, that's only going to get worse?
No, I agree. Except I'm really hopeful. I think that we're watching a shift right now. I actually have this sense that young men are going, I don't want to give up my masculinity. There's something unique about how I've been designed. And that, in fact, the whole language of toxic masculinity is a complete distortion of reality. And that masculinity is actually a gift. It's actually something essential. It's something that's needed in the world. And there may be toxic things, but it's not masculinity. And masculinity is actually, to me, a God-given expression of his image that he has placed inside of men. And we're designed to protect. We're designed in an odd way to fight. We're designed to create and to be proactive. And all this, to me, comes out of love, is that this is the way men express love. When a man loves someone, he puts them above himself. When a man loves someone, he sacrifices for them. When a man loves someone, he protects them. When a man loves someone, he provides for them. And so all these different descriptions that are almost like put in a negative masculinity, for me, they're very clearly the pure expression of how a man loves.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because often someone will think that the man is someone who's wearing a flannel, eating beef jerky, and driving a big truck. But a spiritual man is so much different than that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I just started talking to this guy who's a special ops, but he also has a PhD in psychiatry, which is really interesting. And so I do a lot of mental coaching. I work with a lot of people in optimal performance. So I thought, I'm going to flip the tables. I'm going to go find one of the best in the world, and I'm going to have a conversation with him for me, which I've never done. And I'm 66 years old. This is my first time reversing this out. And they measure something that's called modesty or humility. And what was really interesting is, and I'm just going to share this kind of odd way of sharing this, but out of a scale of 80, I was an 80. And he started explaining to me, he goes, you need to understand this characteristics. Only people in special ops have this higher level of humility. And then he gave me this funny story. He said, how do you know in a crowd that someone is a Top Gun fighter pilot? And I'm trying to guess. I said, they stand up straight or they're wearing a uniform. He goes, no, they tell you. So he said, there's a level of masculinity that has to tell you how important they are. But then the optimal level, the most dangerous men are actually the most humble ones. The ones that don't need to tell you that they're dangerous. They don't need to tell you what they're capable of. And I thought this was interesting because I've always taught that you cannot have true humility if you do not know your power.
Yeah.
That when you are unaware of your power, that's not humility. That's actually just weakness. That's a lack of confidence. That when you understand your power and you've taken a hold of your power, that's when you have an opportunity to be a truly humble human being.
That is really fascinating because with Mountain Tough, we have seen the exact same thing. We've had the opportunity to run in person, high elevation mountain fitness schools for special operations only.
Wow.
And so the majority of our business is in an app where people are training with us around the world, but very selectively, just a couple times a year, we do a school for military individuals, and we spend a few days in the backcountry and then a few days in our human performance facility, talking about the principles of mountain fitness. And through that opportunity, we've gotten to work with some of the most elite individuals in the U.S. military, and every single time that has happened, we cannot stop talking as a team about how humble they are. And it's almost like those communities, they are selecting and searching out that characteristic of humility.
Yeah,
Hey guys, I want to let you know about Jace Medical. I know a lot of Mountain Tough customers, a lot of Mountain Tough community members, those listening to this podcast are going on big hunts, massive expeditions all over the world. We love seeing that, and we love that you already know that you have to train physically for these trips. You have to train with your weapon. You need to be proficient with your weapon, but an often overlooked area of these expeditions is your personal medication. We actually just got back from a trip like this. The Mountain Tough crew went to Kyrgyzstan, and we needed the peace of mind of a customized medical kit that we could take with us, and we needed it at the exact time for this trip. So we went with Jace. We got our Jace case sent directly to us. We were able to grab it, open it up, throw it in our Kyrgyzstan pack, and take it with us. It gave us the peace of mind that in these international environments, we were going to be covered when it came to infection, GI issues, and anything else we were going to run into overseas medically. So check these guys out, an amazing company. The Jace case is going to come with 5 antibiotics that cover the 50 most common illnesses that you're going to run into anywhere in the world. But additionally, there's 29 add-ons that you can choose to customize your kit. So you can throw things in here like ivermectin, EpiPens, anything you need to customize it personally for you. So check these guys out, an amazing brand, amazing company, very practical for the Mountain Tough community. All you need to do is go to jacemedical.com and use the code MOUNTAINTOUGH at checkout. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast.
It's really only an insecure man who comes across arrogant, and self-promotional, and just trying to make themselves bigger than they are. And it's really kind of a powerful thing when you think about the fact that when you are truly powerful, that's when humility actually sets in at the deepest level. And frankly, when I would read the scriptures, one of the things that I came to a conclusion from years and years ago is that humility is the context from which we gain integrity. And integrity is the context from which you gain courage. And so the most courageous person is actually the most humble person, because he doesn't make decisions based on what protects themselves, but what protects others. And so when someone says, you lack integrity, what they're actually saying is you need to go deeper in humility. And if you come to a conclusion in your own life, I don't have the courage I need, you can't build courage. You have to build humility. And that humility actually builds courage.
Wow, that is fascinating. Do you think, is that how you would define how the Bible is talking about meekness? Is that very similar?
Yeah, the definition I use for meekness is controlled strength. Because the most common place to use the phrase meek is with a horse, is when you have a thoroughbred. And a horse is meek once you have controlled strength. You don't want to make a horse weak. In fact, you can't unless you just age them out or beat them to death. When you have a horse that's actually trained, that's a meek horse. because it's controlled strength. And frankly, and this is an interesting thing, when I work with a lot of young men, one of the things that's really missing is self-mastery over their emotions. And when you have mastery over your emotions, then you have meekness. When people say, well, I'm just being who I am, and it's as if who you are has control over you,
Yeah.
or I'm just expressing my feelings. Look, I have the right to feel whatever I feel. I do not have the right to express whatever I feel wants to say or do.
Yeah.
And mastery for me is the ability to have control over your inner world, where your inner world does not have control over you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we've used the example related to that of this show. We talk a lot about mental toughness, and everyone's striving for different ways, tactics, and tools to become more mentally tough. But usually, the majority of the time, they are looking for those tools for a physical realm. And so usually they want a little bit more mental toughness for backcountry hunting, or they think about if I could get more mental toughness for jujitsu or MMA, that would be quite helpful. But what I have seen over the years, and this show has helped a lot with that, is the mental toughness that we're learning in the physical and sharpening in the physical really has to be applied to all other areas of our life. So if we're very mentally tough in the gym, but we can't apply those same principles when we have difficulties in our marriage or in our business or with our children, then we're not really using the tactics to their fullest benefit. They're not applied through our entire life. And the one thing that helped me start to see that is some of the most mentally tough individuals I have ever encountered are not worried about their mindset physically at all. It is if they were in a wheelchair and could not move their body, they are still extremely mentally tough. And so the way that I noticed that is exactly what you just mentioned, is an individual that has more mastered mental toughness has mastery over their emotions. So I think about a farmer or a rancher who has gone through like losing all of their cattle, regaining some cattle, hitting a famine, hitting a drought. And so the external circumstances of their life are going up and down at drastic levels, but their mentality is always positive, forward marching. And so their mindset is so strong because they have mastered their emotions.
I agree. If I could give you two threes, one three is how you build resilience. You build resilience by deepening humility, gratitude, and faithfulness. As you grow in humility and you grow in gratitude and you grow in faithfulness, committing to do the small things, those three things actually build psychological resilience. Humble people are more resilient than arrogant people. Grateful people are more resilient than ungrateful people. And faithful people are more resilient than unfaithful people. And when you build those three things, you actually build this very elusive thing called resilience. Because we know we need resilience, we just don't know how to build it, and no one actually teaches you how to become resilient.
Yeah.
And these are psychological characteristics. As I grew and became more and more grateful, I became more resilient. When I was ungrateful, and I have been ungrateful at times in my life, I actually became more fragmented and more fragile psychologically. And you know people that one small crisis just absolutely shatters them.
Yep.
And you're like, how can this actually cause you to fall apart? It's because of these mental structures of a lack of humility, lack of gratitude, and lack of faithfulness. But another three that I can shift to just for a moment is there are three basic negative materials that inform your brain, your mind, that moves you toward being fragile. One is fear, one is pain, and one is failure. And how you relate to fear, pain, and failure will determine the level of mental toughness you have. When we all struggle with fear, so it's not like some people do not have fear. The only people that don't have fear are sociopaths or psychopaths, and so I don't want that to be the solution for how not to have fear. And if a lion is coming at you, fear is a normal human response. If you're in the middle of gunfire, fear is a normal human response. It doesn't mean that you're not courageous, but how you respond to fear will shape your mental constructs. And one of the things that I always remind myself is that the things that I want to accomplish, like my future, my goals, my dreams, my aspirations, are always on the other side of fear.
Hey guys, there are a lot of trends out there. And one trend that I've personally found in my own life through experience that has been a game changer is cold plunging and cold water therapy. The benefits for me have been off the charts when it comes to two main categories. The physical inflammation reduction from cold plunging every day has been a complete game changer, but my favorite part of cold water therapy has been the mental aspect, the mental clarity, the stress reduction, and most importantly, the ability to build mental toughness every day in a very simple way by just forcing myself to get in that cold water has been a drastic improvement that is easy, fast, and efficient. I've tried countless different ways to access cold water therapy, from the redneck version horse troughs to building my own cold plunge system off Amazon parts and pieces. Every time I've tried that, it has been a disaster until we found Ice Barrel. Ice Barrel is the most advanced barrel design on the market, and they have the most advanced high-tech chiller on the market as well. I've met the CEO, I've worked out with the CEO, we've had them at the lab. They're a great team, American-made manufacturing, and we're proud to announce that you can now access a discount on Ice Barrel products. All you need to do as a podcast listener is use the code MOUNTAINTOUGH. That's going to get you 15% off all Ice Barrels except the chiller. Again, that's Mountain Tough, all caps, all one word, on icebarrel.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast.
Well, when I was growing up, I would evaluate that I was a coward. I mean, I was afraid of everything as a kid, and I had to actually retrain my brain to respond differently to fear. I didn't know how to get rid of fear. That was the material that just kept coming in. So I thought, okay, I can't get rid of this negative material, but I can learn how to use this negative material for a positive impact. So every time I was afraid, I moved in the direction of that fear. Whenever something terrified me, I actually did it. And I just moved. The stronger the fear, the faster my response. So what ended up happening is in my 20s, and you might know a little bit of this, but most people don't. You mentioned it before. I was shocked you even knew. But I spent about 10 years working in the world of drug cartels, gangs, assassins, the world of drugs and prostitution. I would walk into projects that were manned by soldiers with Uzi machine guns at every entryway, cocaine stacked to ceilings, weapons everywhere. And there were a cluster of people who made bets every day on what day I would be killed.
Jeez.
And I did this for about 10 years of my life. And magazines and newspapers came and wrote about things I did back then, and they would assume I had no fear. But what actually happened is I turned fear into a positive fuel. Whenever I felt afraid, I moved toward it. And I remember I got a note from a guy in prison who had slit a guy's throat. And the guy didn't die, so he didn't go to prison for murder. He sent me a note saying when he got out of prison, he was going to kill me. And then a few months later, he sent me another note to let me know he hadn't forgotten me. that when he was getting out in a few months and he was going to kill me.
Jeez.
And what had happened was that the government project where his family lived, his common law wife, they all came to faith, and he felt I was infringing on his territory. And so, for him, it's just black and white. So when he got out of prison, I made a really conscious choice with, I cannot have William Westfall hunting me down. I can't live my life walking down the street wondering if he's waiting behind a corner.
Yeah.
So the moment he got out of prison, I went to the projects. I knocked on the door where he was staying, and I found him. And there's probably 20, 30 people in the little apartment. And when I walked in, they all ran out of the apartment. It was just me and him. And we sat down across from chairs, and he didn't kill me right away because he was so shocked that I would find him.
That you showed up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought, if I'm going to die, I'm going to do it on my terms. And I remember sitting across from him, and he pulls out this massive switchblade, and he said, "This is the same knife I slit his throat with." And he laughed. He goes, "The police never got it." He puts it on the table.
Unreal.
And I've never said this to anyone in my entire life. But in that moment, I looked at him and I said, "Bill, that knife is going to send you to hell." And I could not believe I said that. But what was better is he couldn't believe I said it.
Yeah.
And then I followed it up since I was still alive, and I said, "You think you're tough?" And then my brain said, "Shut up! What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, you are tough, but you're not free. It's behind every corner someone waiting to kill you." And we had this intense conversation. He looked at me and he goes, "You and me, we're the same."
Man.
Because you're insane. He goes, "I'm insane for evil, but you're insane for God." And I was able to enter places in those projects and in that world because that day William Westfall decided I was his friend. He walked out. I walked out with his respect.
Crazy.
And he basically let people know, if you kill him, I'm going to kill you. And it's always great to have a killer on your side, and the guy who doesn't play by the rules. And that was a huge part of my life in my 20s because I learned how to take this negative material, fear, and turn it into a positive fuel. It's the same way with pain. I don't want to take too long, but I learned very quickly that our relationship to pain is a direct relationship to our mental toughness. And we all know this, that pain is a liar. It always tells you that you can't take any more, that this is all you can go through, and enough is enough. And I'm 66 now, so I've broken almost everything on my body in some way or another. And even this year, I was playing a sport called padel. It's a racket sport with glass all the way around. I'm playing super intensely, and I ran and fell wrong. And my elbow was going in a completely different direction. My arm went in two directions at the same time. They had to, about 6 weeks ago, they had to rush me to the hospital, reattach my arm, the whole deal. And what I know about recovery, because when I went to the surgeon about 3 days later, I had almost 95% of all my mobility back, even though my arm was swollen like 5 to 6 times its size. And it's because when I broke my other elbow when I was in college, I knew that my mobility was completely related to my ability to handle pain.
Yeah.
And whenever I would break something or have a surgery, I would ask them, "What's the world's record for recovery?" And I would try to break the world's record every single time. And when I had stage 4 cancer about 10 years ago, and it had metastasized to 3 different parts of my body, and they had a 6.5-hour surgery to get all that cancer out of me. I remember they told me I had to have this catheter in for a month. I got it out in a week, and because no man should have that, just shoved into his penis, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and they had set me up to lay in bed for months. I was on a basketball court 3 months from the day of that surgery. And the reason I'm saying this is because physically, we have absolute proof that recovery has everything to do with our ability to endure pain, our relationship to pain.
Yeah.
We don't realize psychologically it's exactly the same thing. A guy can be devastated because his girlfriend broke up with him, or you can be devastated because you lost a promotion, or devastated because you had a failure in your life. And your ability to recover from that pain, the speed at which you can recover from pain and push through it, is the degree to which you will have mental toughness. Yeah. There's just no question in my mind.
Yeah.
And because your greatness is on the other side of your pain. Just like your freedom is on the other side of your failure, of your fear. Because I always saw fear as the boundary of my freedom. If I don't press through that fear, I will not be free. If I don't press through that pain, I will never achieve greatness. And then just the third one is failure. Failure is that third negative material that will shape our mental toughness. Take fear and see your freedom through it. Take pain and see your greatness through it. And take failure and see your future through it. How you relate to failure is a direct relationship to your internal self-belief. That's why I tell people, never say to a child, you're a failure. Never say to a child, you're a liar. Never say to a child, you're a bad kid. You never define a person by their worst behavior.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages. And I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Use promo code TOUGH for a free Turtlebox hat with the purchase of a Gen 2 speaker. The hat must be added to your cart before entering the promo code TOUGH, TOUGH. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast.
What you want to do is say, you lied. But you're not a liar.
It's not identity.
This is not who you are. You failed, but you're not a failure. This is not who you are. Resilient people never see failure as personal, permanent, or pervasive.
So good.
And they see failure as temporary. It doesn't define me. And it's never all a failure. Highly resilient people mentally, even when they're failing, can see something they succeeded in. I just lost my company, but my marriage is awesome. And I've had moments like that. I woke up one day and I lost somewhere between $6 and $10 million in one day. Because I had a partner who stole my company.
Man.
And which everyone has that story at some point, I think, along the way.
Yep.
And for 30 days, I couldn't eat. I couldn't hold food down. And I went from like 200 to 169 pounds. And it's funny because I always said, wow, I'm looking good at 169. Maybe I needed to go through this level of pain to get myself, that lean.
Yeah.
And you have to, in those moments, go, this is a failure, but I'm not a failure. And if you can, in a sense, move outside of you, failure, and see it as something you experience, but not something you are, it changes your mental toughness. And that's why the best quarterbacks, like I love sports. I've had an opportunity to coach Sean McVay, the head coach of the Rams. He's maybe one of the most brilliant people I've ever interacted with in my life. But one of the things I've studied all my life are quarterbacks, and I've known quite a few of pro quarterbacks. You don't want to see how they play when they're having their best game. You want to watch the game right after their worst game. You want to watch the play right after their worst play. You want to see what they do right after they throw an interception.
Because they're learning.
Every quarterback's going to throw a pick six. That's not what distinguishes greatness. It's what they do the next play after the pick six. It's how they play the next game after the worst game of their career. Because that the ability to to put failure into a compartment
Yeah.
and go, oh, yeah, I failed. It's not denial. See, I don't like those people say, oh, I've never failed. Nothing's a failure. I failed. Like, and I've had big failures, and it's because I've taken big risks in my life. But those failures don't define me. Failure is the material that creates the best future.
That analogy is so good. The pick six analogy is amazing because that is exactly what's happening in our life all the time. But the way the world's best quarterback can learn from that mistake and then apply those learnings the rest of their career and the rest of that game, they're understanding that they made a poor decision, but they're not letting that poor decision, ruin the rest of their week. They're compartmentalizing it quickly, learning from it, and then moving forward. But those things are happening in our life all the time across business, marriage, family.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in about 2 weeks, I will have been married 42 years to my wife, Kim. And a part of what you recognize when you have that long-term of a relationship is that you're going to mess up, and they're going to mess up. And your ability to move past the worst moments, it will be the most critical aspect of having a healthy relationship for a lifetime together.
So true.
And yeah, and it's kind of funny because my wife, Kim, I think about a year and a half ago, she said, I like being negative. She goes, I'm a pessimist. And she goes, I get so tired of how optimistic you are. I get so tired that you always believe in the future and you're always positive. And I thought it was real funny. She goes, I just need you to be negative with me just for a minute. and I think what's happened is, I'm an immigrant from El Salvador. English was not my first language. It was my second language. I never knew my real father. I have one memory of him when I think he kidnapped me as a little boy. My mom had to go work for Pan Am, so my grandparents raised me. She came back, remarried to a guy in what we called creative underground economies. All of a sudden, I have an alias, McManus, which is not my real name, with a guy that now I'm told is my dad. I mean, I have every reason to be dysfunctional.
Yeah.
But by the time I was 10 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair because I was so screwed up psychologically, emotionally, relationally, spiritually. I was just a mess. It would be so easy to go, that's why I never became anything. That's why I never got over, that brokenness. The reality is that when you take responsibility for your life, there is nothing you go through that you cannot overcome.
Well, I have like a million questions. That was amazing. That was one of the best mental toughness descriptions I have ever heard. I love the threes. And I'm super interested in the faith part of the first three because that has been a conversation that I have been having lately is can you have the highest level of fitness of mental toughness without faith? Can you have true mental toughness without faith? And my hypothesis lately has been no, because faith does give you this extra layer of mental toughness for a large variety of reasons. But, one of the reasons that really stands out to me as a follower of Jesus is that when you remove that thought of what's going to happen after I die, and you also add the thought of, this is a temporary home for me as a Christian, and I'm here for specific reasons. It adds some amazing tools when it comes to this mindset stuff, because fear is different, pain is different, everything is more temporary. So what is your take on that of, what does mental toughness look like without faith and with faith?
I mean, I think it's a really interesting observation. And where I would say faith really makes a difference, it's not so much in the afterlife. It has to do with identity. When your identity is rooted in your own accomplishments, it's completely fragile. The reason people have psychological breakdowns when they have a business breakdown or a career breakdown or they lose the Super Bowl or they have a bad career or a bad season is because their identity is rooted on their success.
Yeah.
And things like success and wealth and fame and celebrity and power, they're all great outcomes, but they're terrible intentions. And they're a terrible purpose for life. And the reason a lot of people with faith can recover more quickly is because their identity is not rooted in what they accomplish, but who they are.
Hey guys, I did want to interrupt for a quick minute right here and let you know about some supplements I've been taking. I did shy away from supplements for a long time. I was always cautious about what they were made out of, where they were from, and who the team was behind the brands. But over the last couple of years, I've got to meet the team at Mountain Ops from top to bottom, and they are an amazing group of humans. I've got to know the CEO, Trevor Farnes, really well, and he is a mission-focused individual that cares about humans living a better quality of life so that they can have that abundant life. So over the last couple of years, he has helped me add some things that have changed the game for me. One of those things that I've added is creatine from Mountain Ops. It helps me maintain some muscle mass, but also it's a big player in cognitive function, one of the most researched supplements out there. Also, I've added reds, greens, and protein, all from Mountain Ops. What I found as a busy professional, always on the run, I do eat a whole foods diet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but on the go, it's hard to get enough vegetables, fruits, and protein. So I've added that from Mountain Ops, and it has significantly changed the game. I can feel it in my performance. I haven't got sick for a long time, and I can certainly feel it in my mental clarity as well. The last thing I've added is the Mountain Tough Hydrate product for the backcountry, for hunting season. When I'm in the hills, I do run short on those electrolytes. We even have a Mountain Tough flavor, the Mountain Tough Lemon Lime Hydrate, and that is a game changer for hydration in the backcountry. So I keep it really simple. That is all I've added to my protocol, and it has certainly helped me, and I certainly believe in the team and the culture behind Mountain Ops. They have started an initiative that's been around for a while called Conquer Hunger. Conquer Hunger is giving meals to hungry kids that aren't getting enough food, and they've given out over 6 million meals plus to kids through their Conquer Hunger initiative. So every order that happens at Mountain Ops, a percentage of that order goes to Conquer Hunger. So certainly an incredible company, an incredible culture. As a listener to the show, you do get an exclusive offer to Mountain Ops, so make sure you check that out. The offer is incredible as a first-time purchase at mountainops.com. So build your order if it's your first time. They are offering you a 20% exclusive discount. All you need to do is enter the promo code MOUNTAINTOUGH, all one word, all caps, for 20% off your first order at mountainops.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast.
So when your identity is rooted in who you're becoming, failure or success doesn't change who you're becoming. But when your identity is rooted in what you've accomplished, you're now at the mercy of external circumstances. And by the way, it's amazing how many pro quarterbacks actually are followers of Jesus, the best ones.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, at least twice in combines and in drafts, I've told people this guy will not make it. And it's because both of them were atheists. I don't know how you make it as a pro quarterback as an atheist. Every atheist I've known that went to pro football as a quarterback didn't do well because their whole identity is rooted in their accomplishments. And so it's a very fragile center. I mean, Kirk Cousins is not having the best year of his life, but a part of the reason he's been so resilient and it always seems to emerge on another team and have another great season is that he's such a strong follower of Jesus that his identity isn't rooted in his success or failure.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say names, but I've actually known players who had a strong relationship with Jesus and their careers were soaring. And then when they hit the height of their success, they walked away from their faith and their careers collapsed. And everyone else will think it's some other factor. Maybe it's a team they moved to, or maybe it's that they lost some of their physical, ability or agility. But it wasn't. It was actually an internal framework that was lost that gave them resilience in the past that they don't have now.
Yeah, man, that is fascinating, because we, as Christians, like my wife and I will talk a lot around that exact topic of, I don't know how you would get through things like this without faith. And we're all going to go through crazy adversity, and to go through it with faith, it gives you the perspective of, I don't know how you would get through this without faith. So connecting that to a visualization of a quarterback makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I really do think it's about your identity. Once your identity is rooted in your relationship with Christ, it shifts. You're not working to have value. You're working from value. You're not working to prove your worth. You're working from your worth. And it's just so much more powerful when you have the stuff settled in your soul. And then you're able to build from that. Failure doesn't diminish your value. And in many ways, it may just enhance the story you're in. If you look back at the great stories, right, the great heroes, we know when we watch the story, when you're watching Robin Hood or you're watching Lord of the Rings or whatever, or the hero is going to be the hero at the end because we know the story.
Yep.
And so what you realize is, at the beginning of the story, they were already the hero. They just didn't know it. And it's almost as if we could listen to God speak into our life and say, in a beautiful way, this story has been written, and I'm making you a hero in this story. And so you may not be able to see it right now because you're in the middle of the turmoil, the crisis, the failure. This is where the darkness is prevailing. But I'm just giving the context for your best story to emerge.
I love that, because that helps me a lot, because I think what that does is it's right sizing. And when you can right size God, you can right size the problem, you can right size the story, it changes everything. Because pre-right sizing, everything looks like it's catastrophic. Everything looks like it's the end of the game. But kind of detaching and right sizing the story, you kind of realize, the game's already been won and the story's already been written, and it changes everything.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to ask you a question, but years ago, I did a lot of directing, and I love working in film. And I remember one time, someone asked me what I did. I said, "Well, I'm a director." And my wife goes, "You're not a director. You're not directing anything right now." And I said, "So am I only a directing when I'm directing? Like I've written 14 books, but am I only a writer when I'm writing?" See, so let me translate it to your world. Are you a hunter when you make the kill? Or are you a hunter when you begin the search, the hunt?
You're a hunter when you begin.
Yeah, and it's only the outside perception of you're a hunter once you have achieved the outcome. No, you're a hunter the moment you put on the gear, you strapped up the gun, and you went on the hunt.
Yeah.
And a lot of us think that we don't have value until we've killed the prey or killed the, and rather than realizing, no, when we go into the battle, that's when we're the warrior.
Yeah.
When we begin the journey, that's when we're the hero. It's not at the end.
That's a great.
And because otherwise, I've never fished in my life, right? Because most of the time I'm just out there polling because I never catch anything. And so there's a sense where, are you really fishing? Or are you sitting on a boat with a pole and and a string in the water? No, it's the intention that defines your identity, not the outcome.
That's so good, because hunting also teaches you that it's the pursuit that is the most memorable part. It's not the harvest or the kill. The greatest part of the journey is being out there and failing and learning, and being out there and failing and learning, and being out there and failing and learning. And then if you do end up harvesting a deer or an elk, that's just kind of icing on the cake, but it's the journey that is the greatest part of hunting, and that exact same thing is happening in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNTOUGH to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. You obviously have a very close relationship with Jesus and a very authentic relationship and a strong faith. But what is your testimony? How did that happen coming out of that situation you mentioned of being an immigrant, never knowing your father? What is your testimony?
Well, for me, I grew up basically irreligious. I wasn't anti-religion. I just didn't know anything about it, and my mom was very curious. And I remember there was a time she was studying Judaism and decided she was Jewish. Another time when she brought a Buddha home and decided she was Buddhist. And she was always trying to find God, really. She was just trying to make a connection. Life is hard. She was hoping someone out there cared. And but we didn't really know. No one ever gave us the map, And so my mom was just searching with a broken compass. And then when she was 40 years old and I was in college, she called me and said that she was a Christian, but I had no idea what that was. But she had such a painful life that I was just happy for her because she sounded happy. But it was for me like saying I joined the Peace Corps, or and I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea there was a spiritual connection to it. And then I went home from college for spring break, and my mom and my two little sisters were going to church, which I thought was interesting. That was a new thing, but I didn't have anything negative about it. But I did think it was a little unexpected. And then I went back home for the summer. My brother was in another college, and he was an atheist, and I was more of a mystic. And I wasn't an atheist, but I believed there was a spiritual reality. I just didn't know there was a personal God. And I came home, and we both started working construction. And my brother started going to church, and I thought, this is really weird that my atheist hardcore brother was going to church. And And I told him, I said, like, you're a hypocrite. Like, you're an atheist and you're going to church. What are you doing? And he started reading the Bible. And I said, why are you reading the Bible? And he said, well, if I make a decision of faith, it's going to be an intellectual decision. And I remember telling him, you're lying. You're about to fall. And I saw like giving your life to religion would be like falling. You're just, surrendering
Crazy.
to it.
Yeah.
And I said, why are you really going to church? And he said, great volleyball and beautiful girls. And, I understood that. And I thought I could use some religion in my life if that's what, religion provides. And so I started playing volleyball, so sometimes when people diminish the simple, quote, shallow stuff that churches do, it's the best stuff in the world because, they're simple, shallow people like me out there, trying to connect playing volleyball, and I met people, they were kind, they seemed to have like a real joy. They felt alive and they all believed in God and they all believed in Jesus. And I'm not sure why, but as my whole family came to faith, I became more resistant. And my brother became a follower of Jesus. And then I tapped out. I was like, I remember looking at my brother and I said, if God lets you into heaven, he has no standards.
Oh man, that's brutal.
It was brutal. I know. I look back, I should never said those things, but I didn't understand things like grace. I didn't understand, why who Jesus was, why he died on the cross. I was like a lot of people thinking, to be religious is to be good. Like, it's almost like you have to be good to join, It's like, so if you're a Christian, you have to be good to become a Christian. And I knew I wasn't good, but I also knew he wasn't good. So it's like, and I'm going, well, are there any standards, that this God holds? Because like, if my family's in, all the standards have been shot, to pieces. And it took me a little bit to understand what grace was and why Jesus died on the cross. And then it seemed almost too good to be true. Like, is it really possible that God like lived in human history? Sometimes we forget, like, if you don't grow up in church, that's a hard thing to believe. Right? I'm like, I said, do you realize what you're saying? You're saying that God took on flesh and blood, was born of a virgin, walked among us, lived a perfect, sinless life, and then was killed. It's a pretty intense story. And so but there's something inside of me that said, wow, if there was a God, it would have to be like this. Because every religion, and I studied them all as a philosopher and a philosophy student in college, every religion would tell me what I needed to do to get to God. But the story of Jesus was telling me what God did to get to me.
Yeah, came to you.
And I thought, if there is a God, this is the only way it would happen because I can't get to him. He's got to get to me. Like, I can't make the breakthroughs to get to God. Like, he had to make the breakthroughs to get to me because I'm the powerless one.
Yeah.
I'm the broken one. And that's when I thought, I actually came to just a really quick personal conclusion. Nothing may be true. Maybe nothing is true. But if something is true, it's probably this. This is the one thing that, if I could put it this way, it seemed true, but not in that I needed it to be true. It's almost like, oh my gosh, if this wasn't true, we'd have to make it up.
Yeah.
Because this is what love looks like. The ultimate expression of love is sacrifice. If God is love, his story has to end in a sacrifice for us. Man. And, so Dustin, I gave my life to Jesus, but I can't say it was a super intellectual decision. It was a desperate hope that God was real. And I felt like I threw an anchor into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And said, Jesus, if you're real and if you're out there, like, I'm yours, like, I'm in.
Man.
And all I can tell you is that I had unexpectedly, and then, it's hard to explain, I just had this life-changing encounter with Jesus that changed my life in that moment of just openness. And I started devouring the Bible for the first. I never even knew you could have a Bible, to be honest with you. Like I thought there was like one Bible and Indiana Jones had it, you know, it's like that kind of thing, you know.
The scroll.
And somebody gave me a Bible. I started devouring the Gospel of John, learning who Jesus was. I was so new to all this in college. And when I finished the Gospel of John, I actually cried because I'd never read anything so beautiful in my life.
The
And,
sacrifice.
you know, I felt like I was reading God's memoir, you know, and God saying, not only is this who I am, but this is how I feel about you.
Man, that's
And
beautiful.
it just shook me. And, you know, well, it's been 46 years and it never left me. I just, you know, I've changed my mind on so many different things that I thought, and, you know, and I've grown, and sometimes things I thought were true, I discovered later that that's not true. The one thing that has never changed for me is knowing that Jesus is the hope of the world, and that he has stepped into human history, God himself on our behalf, and will meet us where we are and change our lives forever.
Man, that's so beautiful. And the way that it was unique to you and your personality type, especially, you know, studying philosophy in college, it happened your own unique way for you. That is amazing.
Yeah, it was unexpected. Then I would spend the next 10 years working with drug cartels and gangs and prostitutes in the world of the underground, you know, dark universe. But I think it was really important for me because, and I'll say this, and I know our time is wrapping up, but I didn't know why I should believe the Bible, because like I believed in Jesus, but now they give me this book, right? You know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, how do I know this book is true? Like, how do I know it's accurate? And I made a conscious decision. I said, I need to go to the most broken, darkest part of humanity and see if the principles in this book actually change people's lives. And that's actually a part of what drove me to that part of the world, because I wanted to know if the Bible could actually give us the principles for life.
Yeah.
And so everything I teach, everything I write, it's funny. I work with all these, like, you know, whatever, billionaires and intellectuals and highly creative, artistic, entrepreneurial people. But all the stuff I learned in the hood.
Yeah.
You know, I learned on the streets. You know, I began preaching in street corners and now playing basketball in projects and playing athletes one-on-one and earning the right to be heard and walking into, you know, raids where the police and the FBI and others have invaded in and saving people from getting killed. And that was an unexpected next step of my life, but it's what has convinced me that the principles in the Bible will not only help you meet God, but it'll help you become the human that God created you to become.
Man. Yeah, it's so black and white and so it's visible in those environments where in more like affluent American culture, sometimes the devil can have us right where he wants us because we aren't reliant on God as much as we should and can be. But you get into those different environments where things can be seen much more clearly. And my experience was the same, where my wife and I went to Uganda, and the power of Jesus can be seen much more black and white in some of those environments. And then it is such a strong reminder of how mighty it is. But then you have to carry that same, you know, thinking throughout the rest of your life.
No, absolutely. For most of us, the battle is actually not the battle between good and evil. It's the battle between good and apathy.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, Erwin, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for jumping on the Mountain Tough Show. Your definition of mindset and mental toughness, I love that so much. That was incredibly helpful for me, and it will be for a lot of our listeners as well. And we love what you're up to and what you're doing. I know you do have your new book out, which we did not get the chance to talk about, but maybe we can do that another time.
Sure. And it's called the 7 frequencies of communication and help you connect to yourself, to your family, to your friends, and as a leader. And, but, most importantly, Dustin, thanks so much for reminding us to stay dangerous.
Thank you. What a powerful, phenomenal conversation with Erwin. Just like a lot of our guests, an hour was not quite enough time with him. I could have chatted with him on multiple topics for a couple more hours. He did have to run today. We will try to get him back on the show. I did not even have the chance to talk about his new book. His new book is The 7 Frequencies of Communication. And I have not read the book, but I have taken the assessment. So you go online and you can take his assessment, and it is going to tell you your communication frequency. And that has been so helpful to me. I went ahead and I did that. I am a challenger. So the challenger frequency transmits courage and awakens calling in others. It then unpacks the positives of that and the negatives of that so that you can communicate better with your family, with your spouse, with your team. It's been a super, super cool tool. So check that out if you have a chance. You can also find Erwin on Instagram. And then he has his own podcast as well on the podcast stores. So check that out. As we started the conversation, I let him know that I've been listening to his sermons a lot over the years, and they've been super valuable to me. Love you guys. Thanks so much for being here, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.